All right, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to the first debate of the election 2025 season. Today we are going to be hearing from our third period's Democratic candidate Blake Haines, Senator Blake Haines from Arkansas, and from Senator Tomai Triplett, the Republican candidate from Alaska. As a reminder, this debate is being filmed for future classes' uses. We are also going to be asking questions that have been submitted from the class that you'll be running for, which is first period. Candidates were informed of the rules in the hall, but for our audience to know, each candidate will get a series of questions. They will have 2 minutes to answer that question. The candidate that did not receive the question will then get a 1-minute rebuttal. At the time, each candidate will hear this sound, which is their signal that we will be moving on. All right. According to the coin toss in the hall, Senator Haines won. He is elected to go last. So Senator Triplett will be getting our first question. Oh, goodness. Senator Triplett, how do you plan on strengthening public education and making higher education more accessible and affordable for all students?
Well, education in our nation is no secret that in the past recent years it's become obvious that there's a wide disparity between what's available to more privileged citizens of the United States and more underrepresented and underprivileged citizens of the United States. And through that, I made a point in my platform to suggest that we make higher education more affordable for our students, because not only does it help the lives and the quality of life of every American, but it also translates into our jobs and our corporations and the way we run as a nation in general. One of the things that I suggested is, instead of making our schools corporations, we make our schools educational facilities. We, as a government, would offer categorical grants to schools who, instead of monetizing their name and their sports teams and every club that they have, instead we would focus on more educational based things. Categorical grants will go to lowering the tuition of these schools so that higher education is affordable for all Americans. We would still have the fun names, and we would still have the sports, and we would still have everything that makes our colleges, but in order for everyone to get this experience, there's certain sacrifices that have to be made. And in this, I say that we offer federal funding to students, or we offer federal funding to colleges to lessen the burden of these costs on our underrepresented citizens.
Thank you. Senator Haines, 1-minute response.
Okay. The biggest thing I noticed here is that Tomai likes to focus on higher education affordability. As a Democrat, that sounds amazing. I love that idea, and I fully support it. I've talked about it in my ads and everything. The biggest thing that I'm worried about in Tomai's statement is how they're going to get the money to do that without raising taxes. Do you have a proposed idea for that?
So another thing that I had put in my platform is that instead of the ideals of abolishing our Department of Education, instead we would reform it. Instead we'd create a board of elected officials directly elected by our people, and through that they can raise money through fundraisers, donations, create PACs if they will, to increase the amount of money that's coming to our Department of Education, and through that they can, with the government's permission, offer categorical grants to our schools.
Senator Haines, you have 10 seconds left.
10 seconds. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you. Senator Haines, how do you plan on handling the issue of border security?
Border security, as it is right now, there is a problem, right? There are a ton of drugs and a ton of violent criminals that are coming in through the southern border, and that isn't a problem that we need to address as Americans. But I believe as a country we do not need to close the border. I think that that'll only make an increase of crime and drug smuggling as it is. Even if it is harder to get into the country, it will still lead to, it'll still happen. You know, criminals aren't going to start following the law all of a sudden because we implement new things. So as far as how I'm going to go to fixing border security is, I'm going to increase the amount of personnel we have checking for illicit substances or violent criminals, just searching for weapons or drugs or things like that. And the way I am planning on funding this is by increasing taxes towards individuals with higher incomes, like higher incomes such as like the 10 or top 1% of Americans. We are going to start funneling money more towards the personnel that are down there to defend America's borders.
Thank you. Senator Triplett, you have a minute rebuttal.
There are so many ways to go about protecting our border, and obviously it's not going to be a black or a white decision. Obviously a compromise must be made that ensures the livelihood and the quality of life of our immigrants who are coming into America and searching for the American dream we promised years ago, but also balancing that with the love we have for ourselves and that we want to protect ourselves. So I asked Senator Haines this, if you plan on raising taxes for our people, how is there a balance between what you're doing? Is the detriment to what you're suggesting just as bad as closing the border?
No, because the people I plan on raising taxes to is such a small portion of people who have such a large amount of money. It's not going to impact the average American. It's not going to impact anybody in our community here, really. The 1% of Americans are billionaires. Necessarily, they don't really need all of that money to keep to themselves, and it would be better as America to take that money and spend it where you need it.
Thank you. Senator Triplett, how will you work to protect voting rights and ensure free and fair elections across the country?
So it's no secret that as a nation, we have evolved. We are no longer in the 1900s, the 1800s, where technology isn't a easily accessible or common thing. Our elections, however, have not evolved with the times. We have countless issues with election security and voter fraud, if only because our elections are so outdated. Through this, I suggest that we industrialize our election processes. We should be using more electronic computers and systems and or using more electronic computers and systems to make the voting process easier and more accessible for everyone. We should be utilizing mobile voting so that those who cannot get to the polls, whether they are in rural areas or they're just busy with their lives as the average American is, they have the opportunity to participate in a sacred right that we have in our nation. Through making a more electronic voting system, I also would suggest that we incentivize our corporations, our technological businesses, to create platforms that are secure from other countries and other people and domestic people from influencing and getting in the way of the integrity of our elections. By allowing tax cuts for corporations that would help the government in this manner, not are we supporting these businesses and incentivizing jobs in the technological sector, but we were also improving the security and the safety of our voting process overall.
Okay.
So
Senator
the
Haines?
issue I hear with that statement, the biggest thing would be the tax cuts for these large tech businesses, because that is a huge amount of money. Tech corporations right now are some of America's largest titans in the industry, and I believe that giving them cuts for just small security bonuses, it doesn't really necessarily make sense there. My personal plan for improving the voting system would be focusing more on keeping it the way it is. As it is right now, the biggest issue that we have is transportating the ballots to where they need to be counted. That's the biggest thing with mail-in ballots, and I believe in keeping those, but there needs to be a better system for collecting those ballots and moving them to our accounting places. Tomai, I know that you are a big thing about you are a Republican, so you're focused on lowering taxes for the American citizen, but cutting taxes on big tech corporations are only going to have to make it come back to the citizen.
Okay. Senator Haines, how do you plan to balance fostering inclusivity and collaboration among the citizens of the United States while also addressing specific concerns raised by underrepresented groups in the nation?
So, as it is as Americans, we have a huge issue with poverty in America. I believe that as the federal government, we need to do our best to foster the success of these individuals who may have come from underprivileged households. And that can come from things like Medicaid, federal student aid, food stamps, anything that families can do to take off their monthly budget. I think that is the best thing that we can do as Americans to help the collaboration in between each other. As that goes for everybody, Institutions like FAFSA is going to be great for the underprivileged citizen to be introduced into the educated world and for something that their families may not be used to. And I believe that that is kind of what we need to focus more on as Americans.
Senator?
Citizens, the ideals that Senator Haines is promoting are all out-of-dated systems that many Americans have trouble with. The average American complains that Medicare only services a certain amount of our community. Our food stamps are only for underrepresented people. However, we have countless lower-income people of all backgrounds. I believe the question was also centered upon education, and I also don't understand how all the extra social programs will go to actually helping our schools. Instead, we should be working with our state governments on a local level to influence creating classes, having the hard conversations, making sure our students and our officials are aware of our school boards and our electing officials that actually represent them and what their students need. It's on the local level that we will get these changes for education, not just your government social programs.
Thank you. Senator Triplett, how will you ensure that the United States remains a global leader in advancing human rights and democracy abroad?
I think it's a lesson that we've all heard throughout our lives that before we try and fix anyone else, we should attempt to try and fix ourselves. Who are we as a nation to correct other nations if we ourselves are not perfect or we haven't mastered some sector? I believe that most of my policies focus on domestic initiatives, if only because of the constant dissatisfaction, apathy, and discontent that we are facing when when people think of their government. There should be a culture, a relationship between the government and the people, not just one of discontent, but one where the people actually feel like the government serves them. In order to do that, I have promoted working for higher education, reforming our Board of Education, balancing taxes and simplifying our tax code. And through making these things more transparent with our people, we are able to work as an example for other nations. And it's through being an example as a powerhouse of clean, renewable energy and technological sectors and business sectors that we can begin to help others. But in order to actually fix the discontent within our people, we have to focus on the fact that America is a young country and that we have not, and historically we've been involved with everyone else, but I think it's time we get involved with ourselves.
Thank you. Senator Haines?
Okay, can you please restate the question?
Yes, how do you, oh golly, where am I? How will you ensure that the United States remains a global leader in advancing human rights and democracy abroad?
Okay, so as that question is targeted, it is more abroad. So I feel as though that we should focus more entirely as keeping the world's greatness as the world's superpower. That is kind of our responsibility. Is kind of serving as an example, like Tomai said. But we need to ensure that the world is peaceful and strong as it is now, or healthy as it is now. So I know Tomai focuses a lot on domestic issues or issues that are kind of day-to-day here, but I do kind of want to hear your plans with foreign wars or how we're going to go by solving those big things going on.
So I do believe in strengthening our national security, and one of the biggest things that I will promote is increasing our defensive spending. We should be giving money to Homeland Security, our CIA, FBI, our bureaucracy, so they have the power to go to other nations and to, in a way, influence them into our ideals. However,
Okay, Senator Haines, earlier this year you sponsored a bill on the Senate floor addressing the issue of LSD and the reclassification of that as a drug. I'm curious as to what your stance is on the growing sentiment nationwide at the legalization of marijuana. Would you consider passing any executive order or sponsoring legislation in the Senate as president that would address that issue and that would further the cause that you supported earlier?
Yes, I do believe that it is important that we need to legalize substances that aren't hurting the American citizen. Marijuana has never killed anybody. The drug itself has never one time caused an overdose. It has never one time been a source of addiction. It is only when marijuana is laced with something else, such as ketamine or fentanyl, that really causes issues with marijuana. I believe it could be used in a medical sense in any hospital or any state. There's really no issue that we should have with it as a government, and I do believe it comes with our fear from the 50s and drug running from the border. What we really need to do as America is legalize it, because if it's legal, there's no need to get it from some sketchy source that you just know a friend of a friend that it could be laced with anything, but you honestly don't know. It would be way better if it was accessible to everybody, and if it was, I think it would lead to way less deaths with drugs, and it would cause way less addiction with things like marijuana, because inherently it's not an addictive chemical. It can be abused, and in that case, I believe it is important to foster rehabilitation centers in all of our cities in America, however we may do so. Necessarily itself, though, I believe marijuana is good. And I yield my time.
Senator Haines' plan is to fix a problem by creating a problem. His ideals are not based upon fact. Marijuana is the open door that would lead to marijuana being laced with with actual illegal substances. And for the record, when fentanyl is laced with anything, most likely the result is a fatal dose, regardless of the dose it's taken in. We shouldn't be blaming immigrants, and we shouldn't be blaming people for what's been a systemic issue for much longer than any of us can recall. We can hark back to the opium days when we were still trying to sell opium or get opium from China. By making it legal, we are opening doors to a nation where everyone can make decisions, but it may not even be safe for them. If everyone's telling you no, what is the reason that we are trying to say yes to something that is obviously unhealthy and problematic for our people?
Thank you. Senator Triplett, earlier in this debate, you mentioned your intent to focus on renewable energy. That does serve as a break from your party's platform. How do you plan on balancing that?
So I believe that there is no black and white decision when we are making decision how we want to move forward as a nation. Instead, we should be working to compromise with where the world is heading in order to stay competitive while also staying back to, what works for our nation. I do believe that fossil fuels, oil, will be used as our nation for a long time to come. However, in order to stay competitive with other countries who are taking the initiative for renewable energy, we also must become competitive. We should be, by creating more jobs in the nuclear, solar, and wind sectors, we will be creating innovation, incentivizing jobs, and these are all Republican ideals, not just the ideals of creating renewable energy. It's a means to an end. There's obviously going to be balance, there's obviously going to be trade-offs, but in order to stay the global superpower that we are, we have to stay competitive, not only with the things we used to follow in the past, but we need to look towards the future together.
Senator Haines?
Okay. So, Tomai, just to be clear, you are pro-renewable energy?
I am pro-balance of renewable energy and fossil fuels.
Renewable energy and fossil fuels. Okay. So, as it is, do you plan on increasing drilling in America, oil drilling?
If we were to increase oil drilling, I would do it in proportion to the way that we are also investing into renewable energy, yes.
How do you propose that we limit the environmental impact of drilling in smaller communities where it kind of takes place?
So I also believe that there needs to be regulations put on our fossil fuel use, not only outside of our country, but within our country too. However, obviously there are certain sacrifices that must be made in order to keep the energy and keep the global stage presence that we've had our entire legacy as a nation. However, compensation and eminent domain would give compensation to those who were hurt through drilling. However, that would not be our intent purpose. We would want to focus on renewable energy and the balance of both where we can.
Thank you. All right, Senator Haines, it is no secret that you are an independent and that you somehow secured the Democratic bid. Would you care to tell the constituents in first period how that happened and why you chose to run as a Democrat?
Okay. As the independent party, I believe most of the things that I personally align with as a senator, my Democratic Party of third period guys also sort of aligned with. I know that I have done some things for the Republican Party as an independent senator. I've passed bills such as the, what was it, Clean Foods Act? I don't remember the bill, but what I was doing was I was creating a greenhouse for our school to kind of have a more, an easy introduction for students who like to learn to garden or have a healthier lifestyle. It was a means that I did to create that. That's not necessarily a Republican idea. Although there is jobs that is created from that, they don't necessarily like the idea of green education. They don't like the use of renewable energy sources or things that may take away jobs from oil field workers or certain things like that. But I believe as the Democratic representative that we do need to work towards a greener America, and that will in the end help increase the lifespan of our American citizens and do our best to make everybody healthier.
Thank you. Senator?
So I would just like to make a clarification on behalf of my platform that we never stated that we were taking jobs. If anything, by investing in our renewable and fossil fuel sectors, by becoming an energy superpower overall, we will be creating jobs for everyone. And as a whole, my party and my platform supports renewable energy. We are not against it, which is why Senator Haines helped pass our bill in the first place, because it is a progressive bill. However, we will be creating jobs and supporting corporations, which are fundamental to our party. So I asked you, Senator Haines, you focused on the bills that you were trying to pass, but not why you really wanted to switch to a Democrat. What was it about the party that switched your views entirely?
Their ideas with taxes, that was their biggest thing. I want to lower taxes for the American citizen, and I also believe that that is a huge issue as we are today in America.
I suggest lowering taxes for who? Because it's obvious that in this day and age that the 1% is much larger than it used to be, and we have much more artists and actors who are, sorry.
Forgot I had a bell. All right, Senator Triplett. One of the things that we have heard over and over again is the stress that Americans are feeling at the pump, the stress that Americans are feeling at the grocery store. What plans do you have to address these issues?
So, like I stated before, I believe that there should be a positive and productive relationship between the government and the people. And I do feel like that starts with our tax code. Our tax code allows for many loopholes for many corporations to take advantage of our small businesses and our underrepresented and underprivileged citizens. By simplifying our tax code, we are making it not a document and a system that only the government eyes and ears can understand, but instead that we can foster transparency to our people and they can understand what is happening to them. They should understand why we should be offering classes and offering seminars on the local level that's explaining to people the actual causation of the economic problems we're facing. And through simplifying the tax code, by preventing loopholes, we will be, in the end, giving more money to those who actually deserve it by leveling the playing field for everyone. I can't give you every answer for what the economics or policy is going to look like in the future, but I can promise you that whether it's the first try or the 20th try, I will keep trying until we find something that works for America, that works for all citizens, and not just ones that are lower class or upper class, but for all.
Thank you. Senator Haines.
Okay, so when you walk in a grocery store, the first thing you see is produce, a lot of the time. And I believe that we need to look at the source of this produce, and that will kind of help us lower prices. The source of the produce is the farmers. I think that we need to help farmers out by giving them grants or giving them tax cuts towards however they may operate their farm. Right now, it's harder than ever to start a farm. If you wanted to major in agriculture out of college and go into the business, it would cost a large amount of money for farm equipment. I think right now, the average John Deere tractor costs around $300,000. And that's a very large loan for such a small tractor. Now combines, they can range from anywhere between like $500,000 and like $1 million for just a starter combine. That is just what it is. And I think that if we were to provide money as the government to these farmers, that would altogether decrease the prices in the grocery stores and the cost for food.
Thank you. Senator Haines, do you plan on focusing more on domestic issues or foreign involvement?
Domestic issues. There's a lot of problems in America as it is today. We have an increasing poverty rate, we have a lowering middle class, we have lower representation of our political parties and communities. And I believe that these are all problems that we need to fix for ourselves first, then fixing other nations' issues as a whole. The biggest thing that I believe our issue is in America is our economic discourse. There's such a large gap between the lower income Americans than even the middle class Americans. Citizens are making less money than ever, and they can spend it even less with the rising inflation rates in America. And I believe that we need to do our best as the federal government to decrease prices and increase income for our citizens.
Senator Triplett?
I've sort of already touched on this idea before, and I've already said that we are going to be focusing more on domestic policies because it's obviously a national issue that the discontent and dissatisfaction of all of our communities is of the utmost focus. However, as I also said before, we will be balancing that with becoming an example for other countries, if not through outright participation, then through leading by example in all sectors of business, both private and public, leading in education and even space exploration. I believe, or Senator Haines, you said that you want to focus on domestic issues by making things more affordable. What funding, or where would you get the funding for those things, or without raising taxes for the Americans you're trying to protect?
10 seconds.
Okay, so right now, taxes on billionaires are very, very small. We need to increase those taxes as much as we can because there's no reason for someone to have $15 billion. They just can't spend that in their lifetime or anybody else's lifetime. That's such an unbelievable amount of money, and I believe that's how we can fund these programs.
Thank you. Senator Triplett, earlier last year, the IRS was given a grant from the federal government to increase their capability in looking for tax fraud. And as a result, they have found over $1 billion in taxes that have been squirreled away in offshore accounts or in unnecessary write-offs. As a Republican, would you agree to continue these programs in order to increase the amount of taxes that the IRS is able to find? Or would you increase the amount of tax benefits to corporations to foster the economy?
As always, there is no black or white answer. However, I do believe that through my program of simplifying our tax code and preventing these loopholes in the first place, that we would prevent the IRS from even having to go after as many corporations because there would be less write-offs. Write-offs, if possible, should be coming from the government through grants and subsidies, things that we are offering to the people because there are sometimes things that the government will know that the people will not. And that does not mean lowering or preventing tax write-offs for everyone. However, in the amount that they can happen, whether it's through 501c3s or PACs or any type of method that can be used for a write-off, especially for our upper class citizens, we should be protecting everyone. And by only allowing these certain programs to be created by upper class citizens, we're preventing the equality across all citizens.
Thank you. Senator Haines?
Okay. Can I just can you say the question one more time?
Yes, considering the amount, so the IRS was given a grant over a year ago to go after taxes that should have been recovered. As a result, they've recovered over $1 billion of hidden taxes that had not been paid. Would you agree to bolster this program, or are you going to be going on the side of tax cuts for corporations?
Yeah, no, we need to definitely reinforce the program that's finding money that's not being given to the government. If that money, if there's more than $1 billion outside of the United States that's being spent inside of the United States, there's no way for us to there's no way for us to use that money to improve our country, and I believe that is a huge issue. Because that is a lot. That's a lot of money. If you look at, I don't know, how much does the average American pay? 23% in taxes. 23% of $1 billion is 230 mil. Is it 200? It's either 230 million or 23 million. I can't remember the number right now. I'm a little nervous, but that's quite a bit of money that we could use towards programs that may help America's farmers decrease prices on produce, or even social programs like Medicaid, FAFSA, or different things like this.
Senator Haines, what measures would you advocate for to reform the criminal justice system and address systemic inequality?
Okay. Right now, there is once again a huge level of poverty in America. A lot of the reasons some of these criminals commit acts of burglary or things like this is out of necessity. They need money and they can't find jobs. So I believe that in order to decrease the amount of repeat offenders coming out of prisons, we need to increase funding towards programs like rehabilitation or making it easier for them to have food. I'm okay with even providing them food outside of prison the second they come out, just to make sure they're not starving and dying or needing to rob people for money. That's a really good thing. For these little, I believe there is a program that already does this. I think they're called halfway houses. I'm not entirely certain. But I would like to have a place for prisoners to go whenever they get out of prison for like a 6-month period to where they can kind of get back on their feet and they have a safe place to sleep and a safe place to eat so that they don't have to feel the motivation to go rob somebody for money and pay for these neat necessities.
Thank you, Senator Triplett.
Senator Haines, are you suggesting that people who come out of prison want to rob other people for the things that they don't have instead of rejoining the workforce and becoming productive members of society?
I think that they need to. I don't think that there is a means for them to get jobs to pay for these necessities. And if you're robbing somebody for money in the first place, I don't believe it's out of ill will. You don't even really know the person you're robbing half the time. A lot of the time it's just because you want to feed your family as bad as the other person wants to feed their family. And I think the issue there is we just need to provide food for people who need it. It's really the base of it.
So what does this actually have to do with reforming our justice system? Because it sounds like you're assuming that Americans will commit crimes instead of saying how they will, or how the justice system can be improved to not commit crimes.
10 seconds.
There is a necessity to prevent crimes in the first place, but if we want to make it easier for people to come back into society, that's also going to decrease the amount of crimes. Because a lot of criminals are repeat offenders. That is just how it is as today stands, and we just need to prevent the repeat offense of crimes that are happening.
Thank you. Senator Triplett, you've talked a lot today about your intent to bring America into the center, to focus on itself and solve the problems of ourselves before we head out into the world to solve those issues. Considering the role that we've held in global economy and in global foreign relations over the last 80 years, how do you plan on balancing those?
Well, honestly, I don't see why they have to change. I honestly feel like there's a balance in between investing in ourselves and allowing that investment to show on the global stage. If we're creating jobs, if we're increasing innovation, if we're promoting the arts, if we're promoting what really makes America America, we will still stay the leader in all of these sectors. We will still be creating jobs, whether it's fossil fuels or renewable energy. We will still be creating jobs, whether it's in the arts or sciences. We will be funding exploration or space exploration efforts. There's no amount of investment into our society that won't reflect towards everyone else, because at the end of the day, America is a pinnacle of many countries. I mean, it's not perfect by far, but we have set the standard in some stages, and I don't see why those have to change. But I also do feel, as Senator Haines said earlier, we shouldn't be assuming our people will commit crimes. We shouldn't be assuming our people won't want to invest in themselves. I have a good positive mindset about what the American people are capable of, and I know if given the chance, we can rise above the challenges we've originally faced and become a nation that not only is globally renowned for how other people perceive us, but how we perceive ourselves. I wouldn't want a president who perceives each American as possible crime offenders. Instead, I want a president who sees us all as people who have the potential for greatness.
Thank you. Senator Haines?
I don't see every American as a possible crime offender. I believe that if you're hungry, you're going to find a way to eat. No matter how that food may come to your mouth, that just is what it is. It isn't a good thing. It isn't something we should shrug over, and it is something as a country we do need to address. There needs to be a way for families to have safe homes and roofs and to have healthy relationships and even to further their own education. I believe that is kind of an essential issue we need to focus on. Will you restate the question one more time? Just a short one.
Yes, the question was, how do we maintain the stance, the foreign relation stance that we've had for the last 80 years while focusing on domestic policy?
Okay. So to maintain our foreign relations that we've had for the past 80 years, I believe that we would need to put a bigger focus on the international interpretation of the United States government. I kind of think that everybody thinks that we're a joke. As it is, our last couple presidencies have been rough, and we need to do our best to regain our control that we had, or our influence that we had over the outstanding nations, or the UK, or any additional allies.
Thank you. Senator Haines, you've discussed a lot about the idea of economic inequality and how that's affecting Americans daily versus how it's affecting them as they come out of reform systems. What policies do you plan to prioritize to address income inequality and ensure economic opportunities for all Americans?
Okay. Income equality is, again, a massive issue in America. Right now, I've said this a couple times, but right now there is a large gap between the 1% and the 99%. It doesn't make sense for such a small group of people to have such a large amount of money. So I believe that we need to increase taxes for those individuals making $15 million a year. There's no reason to have that amount of money. And I believe we need to decrease taxes on a smaller income families. It doesn't make sense to take advantage of the smaller families than the 1% who are getting around taxes anyways. I think that's the legislation we need to pass as far as that goes. Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. Senator Triplett?
Presidency or government, good or bad, I have faith in the American people. I have faith that despite our differences and despite all the challenges we face at the end of the day, we can all unite around the fact that we are Americans. We can all unite around the history of where we came from nothing and became what people are aspiring to be and achieve. In order to address the income inequality, I'm not suggesting that we take from either side out of proportion. Instead, we should be promoting balanced taxes where we are limiting the amount of taxes that we are putting on our lower class citizens, but we are not taking people's money that they have earned rightfully from them. Because at the end of the day, these are our people who are leading our corporations, these are people creating our businesses. And if we want to continue to stay competitive in these sectors, we can't be taking money from our CEOs, our actors and artists, because these are the people who are championing leading America forward.
Thank you. Senator Triplett, you've talked about the tax code a lot today. You've discussed about how you want to see a fair system, how you want to see a more clarified system for the American people. Would you care to elaborate on what you want the tax system to look like? Are you recommending a flat tax system for the Americans?
I'm not recommending a flat tax system, rather a more simplified one, where we are using a balance between both logic and compassion for all of our citizens. We should be promoting balanced taxes, where if we are taxing the upper class in some mode or form, we are taxing the lower class in a proportional manner. Because at the end of the day, we have to recognize the difference between equality and equity. I like to use the analogy of a race. We have our upper class citizens who are miles ahead of our lower class citizens. But in order to promote equity, we have to put them together. By creating balanced taxes, we would be putting everyone on the same playing field. However, if one person were to win the race, you wouldn't hold that against them, because at the end of the day, it's a merit-based system. By creating balanced taxes, everyone would eventually have the opportunity to have a good start in their economic journey, whether that's investing or just providing for their families on a lower scale level.
Thank you. Senator Haines?
Okay. Imagine you had $100 and I took 25. That would hurt. If that was your last $100 bill and I took a quarter of it, that would be a big problem. Now imagine you had $100 billion and I took $25 billion. You still have $75 billion, and there's really no way you're gonna really even feel the $25 billion. It's a large sum of money, but you can't spend that much money ever. I believe that there is a need to tax richer people more. I know that Tomai hasn't outright said it, but I do believe that is kind of what she is hinting towards, just not to the extreme of mine. I think that if you're going to be a greedy CEO, you need to pay for it. If you want to raise prices to increase the money that's coming into your pocket, you need to pay for the difference. It doesn't make sense to incentivize the increase of money that these people are making, and just by lowering their own taxes and motivating them to do worse pretty much.
Thank you. Senator Haines, how do you plan to improve educational standards in the United States?
Education as it stands in America is expensive. Going to college is, I think the prices are the highest they've ever been, really. For an in-state student to get into Texas A&M, the price is roughly 20 grand. And that number can go up and down, it fluctuates. But for a family that can't afford it, that's that's a large number. If a family makes $60,000 a year, they're not gonna be able to afford that necessarily. And yes, they can take out loans and grants that they will pay back for the rest of their life, but, not grants, but loans that they'll pay back for the rest of their life. That isn't necessarily a thing that we need to push forward in America. I believe in making education as cheap as possible for everybody. And I think that would drive up Americans, that would drive the amount of students coming out of high school going into college and getting higher educations. I believe that would raise the standard again for America as a whole to continue going, because now there's less excuses for us not to be higher educated.
Okay, follow up. Do you plan on maintaining the systems that we have in place with No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top, or are you going to be doing anything with the compulsory education system in the United States?
No Child Left Behind works. I've seen it work personally. I know students who have just done everything that they can to pass a chemistry class, and they miss one test, and it's just like, it bombs them terribly. And I believe that anything that these students, any amount of help that some of these students need should be given to them by the schools. With No Student Left Behind, yeah, it works, and we should keep moving forward with it.
Senator Triplett?
Unlike Senator Haines, I have an actual plan for how we can make higher education more affordable. As I stated earlier, I believe that decreasing the monetization of our schools, and instead of making our schools corporation-like names, we make our educational facilities. We'd be giving categorical grants to our schools to give to students to fill the disparity gap between the amount of tuition between schools by preventing the monetization of our schools. And any money that's coming from this monetization can be used to lower the tuition for the students, not just to make sure your football team has the best name and it's known globally. Senator Haines, I wonder, how do you actually go about implementing your policies? Because whether that's through reforming the Department of Education or anything, you haven't actually suggested anything. You're just saying, make it more affordable. That's not a plan.
Make it more affordable for citizens by giving the grants. I think that if the government gives them money, it should be, there's less of an excuse to not go. If any one of us in this room can get $40,000 to go to school, why wouldn't you? You know, if it's free, then take it. I know that you have said a lot about keeping institutions away from like making money. How are they going to pay teachers or professors? If they're not taking money from their students, it doesn't make any sense.
I mean, at the end of the day, they are still being funded by the government on some level. Like I said, these categorical grants will go to lowering tuitions, but of course these would be fielding the cost for creating corporation-like schools. You said it earlier that we should be taxing the 1%. Are schools such as Texas A&M, UT, Georgia, these are schools that everyone knows. If it's not much, like you said, to take money from a school that has that much notoriety. If anything, the notoriety will stay, but instead it will be allowing a more wide variety, more diverse group of students to be attending higher education, which is something we should be promising to all students, that it's not whether you're insanely talented at a sport you get to go to these schools. You should be going because you want to invest in the future of America, because you are America.
Yeah, I did let that go a little bit over. I wanted to see how that played out. We are heading into our final set of questions. Senator Triplett, in the last 96 hours, we have seen the cracks in our healthcare system broadcast globally with the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO, and with the frustration that we've seen online of individuals reacting either apathetically or gleefully to the death of this gentleman. How do you plan on addressing the issues of the healthcare system in the United States?
Well, first of all, my condolences go out to the CEO and his family. I don't believe for any reason anyone should be killed for their political beliefs. I believe that's an extreme, that if we don't support the death penalty, how are we supporting a random gunman taking down someone that we see as our citizen? However, I do believe that the healthcare stances that we have in America do need to change. And I do believe, I can't remember the exact term for the word, but if we as a nation invested more in HSAs, and we were instead of relying fully on insurance, we were relying on these saving accounts, which in the current times they don't produce much interest on the money that's being put into these savings accounts. But if we were as a nation to raise the interest on these bank accounts, we would be allowing citizens to have more money overall to protect themselves and not have to rely on the government to support them. Instead, each American would be able to take the initiative through the HSAs to put money into, actually I think I remember, healthcare savings accounts, to instead of relying on insurance and the issues that we've had in the past, instead rely on the average common American and have every man rely on themselves.
Thank you. Senator Haines?
Okay. Now, I can't stand up here to goodwill and say that violence is good. What happened to that billionaire is, it's terrible, and I do give condolences to that family 100%. I believe that these insurance companies are greedy and that they need to be stopped. There is no reason for life-saving drugs to be driven up in price simply because of the fact that we want more money. No matter who you are, that's evil. If it's a life-saving drug, it should be affordable to anybody who may need it. I believe that if you drive up the price on that drug, you are just as bad as the murderer that killed that billionaire. There is no reason for your greed to cause someone's death. As it goes, HSAs, they're great. If you can rely on yourself to pay for your own insurance, that's amazing. But I do believe that if we put more funding towards programs like Medicaid and there's a less competitive spirit between these insurance companies, it will, in the end, cause the cost of drugs to go down. That just kind of is how it is. If no one's buying your insurance, then you're not going to raise the price on it.
Okay. Thank you. Senator Haines, this is the final question for this round, and then we'll move to closing statements. Again, it has been a very interesting 96 hours, and in so we have seen the fall of the Assad regime in Syria, ending a 20-year civil war. This introduces an entirely new set of unknowns to the United States government. How do you plan on addressing the newly found instability in this region with the loss of the Assad family?
So the Middle East has always been unstable. I don't believe by any means that we should decrease security around that region or move any necessarily. That's a tough question. I believe that we should have our eyes out. We should definitely be looking over there and seeing kind of what's going on, what the feel of the temperature is in that specific area. If we feel as though there are any threats given towards Americans, we should be on guard with those. We should be very proactive in finding who is making these threats and getting whatever we can do to prevent them. That region, once again, we should do our best to help the citizens there, though. We should be sending resources to the people who may be struggling due to the financial instability in that region at all. Even if it's airdropping water bottles and other things like that. Families just may need that.
Thank you. Senator?
I completely agree with Senator Haines in that we should never stop contributing to our humanitarian efforts around the world. Not only does it humanize us in a way that some other countries aren't able to fully conceptualize, in a way I don't even think we can fully conceptualize ourselves, it's important for us as people to remain people who see other people, no matter their ethnicity or their country, as other people. However, a commonality between this entire debate is that Senator Haines has no plan to implement these things. In my bill that I had produced in the Senate, I had suggested that we increase our defense spending. We should be giving money to our Homeland Security, ICE. We should be giving money to our CIA and FBI so that they can be our eyes for us. Obviously, the social media has become a game of telephone where everything is distorted. If we're hearing it from our actual government agencies and they're having the money and we trust them through categorical grants to do what they can to protect us.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the question portion of the debate. Senator Triplett, you have 1 minute.
So, I said it before and I'll say it again. My platform has never been black or white. It's never been extremes. It's never been driving a wedge through sensitive issues just because the Republican Party or I felt like it. The entire purpose has been to help you. On my platform are the words of the Dalai Lama. If you can help, help. If you can't, do not hurt. There are some places that the government cannot have its hands. I support limited government in these areas. However, there are also things that the government can do more to help the average American. And by helping the average American at home, we would be setting an example for all countries abroad, including the Middle Eastern country that was brought up earlier. Like I said before, I am supporting making higher education affordable, reforming the Department of Education. I'm supporting simplifying our tax code and creating balanced taxes. By investing in ourselves, we are investing in all of America. Like I said before, do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. It's time to get to work, America.
Thank you. Senator Haines, you have 1 minute.
Okay. As it stands, America, we have a lot of hard workers out there that are doing their best to just feed their families. We need to do our best to help those individuals out and to foster the motivation that they feel that they have for everybody in America. I have a very great opponent today, as it seems, Tomai, and I do admire how well you did today. And yeah, a lot of the things that we kind of talk about today, we honestly kind of silently agree on. There are a lot of issues in America that we both can fix, definitely. So whenever you're voting for your candidate, just do your best to create a safer, smarter, and a richer America, please. That's all I have.